Emily Carter believed some evenings were meant to pass quietly and be forgotten. That was what she thought when she and her husband Mark arrived at Daniel and Lisa Morgan's house on a cool Seattle night, rain shining on the streets like silver lines, the city calm and ordinary, nothing hinting that this night would stay with her for years. The four of them had known each other for a long time, long enough that shoes were kicked off at the door, jokes flowed easily, and silence never felt awkward, and Emily trusted that comfort because her marriage with Mark had been built on it. 10 years of shared routines, shared plans, shared calm, a love that did not surprise her anymore but had never scared her either. And that night began the same way, with warm lights, soft music, and the smell of dinner filling the room. Daniel talking about work, Lisa laughing as she poured drinks, Mark relaxed on the couch, and Emily sitting with her legs tucked under her, smiling and listening, feeling safe in the familiar rhythm of friendship. Conversation drifted from small things to deeper ones, about how life changes, how people grow, how closeness can fade if it is not cared for, and Daniel spoke openly, calmly, the way he always did, about how affection mattered, how people sometimes forgot how powerful a simple, honest moment could be, and Emily noticed how thoughtfully he spoke, not flirtatious, not dramatic, just sincere, and she did not think much of it until he suggested something that made the room feel suddenly smaller, a simple exercise, he called it, nothing strange, nothing physical in a way that mattered, just a hug, a reminder of connection, and Emily felt her shoulders tense even before she realized why. Because hugs were not dangerous, because she hugged friends all the time, because Mark was right there, smiling, relaxed, nodding like it was no big deal, and Lisa looked calm and encouraging, saying it was harmless, just warmth, just human comfort, and Emily told herself she was overthinking, that refusing would look rude, dramatic, and she stood up when Daniel did, moving toward him as naturally as she could, feeling awkward only for a second before his arms closed around her, gentle and steady, not tight, not loose, just present, and something about that presence surprised her, because it felt focused in a way she was not used to, like he was fully there in that moment, not distracted, not rushing, and the hug lasted longer than she expected, long enough for her to notice her own breath, long enough for her thoughts to quiet, long enough for a strange warmth to spread through her chest, and when she pulled back, smiling too quickly, she felt her heart beating faster than the moment deserved, and she laughed it off, stepping aside, telling herself it was nothing, absolutely nothing. But when she glanced at Mark, she noticed his smile was a little stiff, his eyes thoughtful, and that unsettled her more than the hug itself. The rest of the evening moved faster, conversations overlapping, laughter returning, but Emily felt slightly off balance, like she had stepped onto a moving surface without realizing it, and she kept replaying the hug in her mind, not because it was inappropriate, but because it had made her feel seen in a quiet way she had not felt in a long time. And that realization brought guilt rushing in, sharp and sudden, because she loved Mark, because she had no right to feel anything else. And when they finally said goodbye and walked back to their car, the rain lighter now, Mark's hand warm in hers, Emily tried to shake the feeling, tried to ground herself in the familiar weight of her marriage, telling herself that comfort was what mattered, not moments, not feelings that came and went. And at home, as they got ready for bed, Mark asked casually if she had enjoyed the evening, and she said yes, because it was true, and because she did not know how to explain the part that wasn't. And when the lights were off and Mark's breathing slowed beside her, Emily lay awake, staring into the dark, the quiet. Louder than before, her mind restless, returning again and again to that brief moment in Daniel's arms, not as something she wanted, but as something that had awakened a question she had not known was sleeping, a question about connection, about how easily lines could blur without anyone intending them to. And as the night deepened, Emily felt a soft unease settle into her chest, the kind that does not shout but whispers, the kind that suggests change long before it arrives, and she turned on to her side, facing Mark, listening to the steady sound of his sleep, telling herself again that it was just a hug, just a moment, just her imagination, yet somewhere deep inside, she knew that moments like that did not come without meaning, even when no one wanted them to. After that night, life did not slow down, but Emily felt like something inside her had started moving too fast to stop, because days passed and nothing looked different from the outside, work, home, dinners, weekends, but her Thoughts no longer stayed where she told them to, and she caught herself thinking about Daniel at odd times, not in a romantic way she could name, but in flashes of memory, the calm tone of his voice, the steady way he listened, the feeling of being fully noticed for a brief second, and she hated that those thoughts came uninvited, because she loved Mark and respected her marriage, and she reminded herself again and again that feelings were not actions, that thoughts did not mean betrayal, yet. The guilt stayed close, quiet but heavy. Messages in the group chat continued, casual and friendly, jokes, shared plans, nothing crossed a line, but Emily noticed how quickly her attention sharpened whenever Daniel replied, how she reread his words even though they were simple, harmless, and she scolded herself for it, trying to focus on Mark, trying to be present, yet Mark himself seemed different too, more animated after dinners with the Morgans, lighter in a way Emily had not seen in a while. And when she asked about his day or his thoughts, he answered honestly but briefly, like someone who had already shared his deeper thoughts elsewhere, and that realization unsettled her more than jealousy ever had, because it made her question when that distance had begun. The next time they all met, the air felt charged even before anyone spoke about it, not tense, but alert, like everyone was aware of something fragile between them, and conversation flowed quickly, moving from topic to topic. Laughter filling the spaces, yet Emily sensed an effort behind it, as if everyone was trying to keep things normal, and when Daniel suggested another exercise, this time a slow dance meant to focus on trust and presence, Emily's first instinct was to refuse, to step back, to protect what felt already shaken, but she looked at Mark and saw him nod, calm and open, and she told herself that fear was not reason enough to say no, that running away from feelings would only give them more power, so she agreed, even as her heart beat faster, and when Daniel placed his hand lightly on her shoulder, respectful and careful, Emily focused on her breathing, on the simple movement of stepping forward and back, on the fact that this was not wrong, not secret, not hidden, yet emotion does not always follow rules, and she felt a pull that surprised her, not desire, not excitement, but understanding, as if Daniel saw a part of her she had forgotten how to show, and across the room she noticed Mark dancing with Lisa, their movements easy, natural, his posture relaxed in a way she had not felt in their own dances lately, and something sharp and unexpected cut through her chest, a jealousy she did not recognize at first, because she had never doubted Mark before, never questioned his loyalty or his love, and that feeling scared her more than the closeness she felt with Daniel, because it made her realize how much she had taken stability for granted. When the dance ended, everyone laughed it off, calling it interesting, thoughtful, nothing more, but Emily retreated inward, watching small details she had ignored before, the way Mark listened closely to Lisa, the way Lisa smiled softly when he spoke, the way Daniel stepped back a little, creating space as if he understood the danger of closeness better than anyone else, and on the drive home, silence filled the car, not uncomfortable but loaded, and Emily wanted to ask Mark what he was thinking, but fear stopped her. Fear that hearing the truth might make it impossible to pretend everything was fine, and that night, lying beside him, she realized how thin the line was between honesty and hurt, and how easily good intentions could turn into quiet damage. Days later, the tension grew without words, Emily more aware of every change in Mark's mood, every message he received, every late return home, and when she noticed him spending more time at the Morgans' house, always with reasonable explanations, always open about where he was, she told herself not to imagine things, not to create stories that were not real, yet. Doubt settled in her like a slow shadow, because trust, once questioned, changes how you see everything, and when Emily finally caught Mark and Lisa deep in conversation on the balcony one evening, their voices low, their posture close but not improper, something inside her shifted, not into anger, but into clarity, because she understood then that no one had planned this. No one had meant to cross a line, but lines were already fading, not through touch, but through shared thoughts, shared understanding, shared emotional space, and as she stood there, unseen, Emily realized that pretending nothing was happening would only lead them somewhere they could not return from, and for the first time since that night of the hug, she felt certain of one thing. Whatever this was, it could not stay unspoken much longer without breaking something important forever. The truth arrived quietly, without drama or warning, on a normal afternoon when Emily came home earlier than planned and noticed Mark's car parked outside Daniel and Lisa's house, an ordinary detail that suddenly felt heavy, because she stood there longer than she should have, rain beginning to fall again, watching the warm glow behind their windows, her mind racing through reasons and excuses she did not fully believe, and instead of going inside, instead of confronting anything she was not ready to name, she turned around and walked back home, each step feeling harder than the last, because waiting felt safer than knowing. And when Mark finally returned hours later, his face told her the truth before his words ever could, not guilt exactly, but a tired honesty that made lying impossible. And when Emily asked where he had been, he did not avoid her eyes, did not grow defensive, did not raise his voice. He simply told her that things had gone further than they should have emotionally, that long talks had turned into shared feelings, that nothing physical had happened but something important had shifted. And Emily felt a hollow open inside her chest, because emotional truth cut deeper than any imagined betrayal. And when she asked about Daniel, her voice steady even though her hands shook, Mark admitted that Daniel felt the same pull toward her, not because anyone planned it, not because anyone wanted to hurt anyone else, but because they all let honesty go too far without guarding the people they loved most. The conversation that followed was calm but devastating, because calm words leave no room to hide. And later that night all four of them sat together, the same living room now heavy with silence instead of laughter, tears falling freely, apologies spoken without excuses, and no one tried to shift blame, because everyone understood the same painful truth, that openness without boundaries had led them here. And as Lisa spoke through tears about feeling seen and heard for the first time in years, Emily felt sympathy instead of anger, because she recognized that same longing in herself. And Daniel admitted he should have stepped back sooner, that he had confused emotional clarity with emotional freedom. And Mark reached for Emily's hand, holding it tightly as if afraid she might disappear, and Emily let him, not because everything was forgiven, but because love does not vanish the moment it is wounded. As the night ended, decisions were left unfinished, space was promised, and nothing felt resolved. And when Emily stepped outside into the cool night air, she felt both exhausted and strangely clear, because the unspoken had finally been named. And as she stood alone on her porch, she saw Daniel walk back toward his house, his shoulders heavy, his steps slow, and for a brief moment he turned, meeting her eyes across the quiet street. And in that look there was no hope, no invitation, only shared understanding and regret. And Emily realized then that this chapter of confusion had already taken something from all of them, something they could not get back. And whether their marriages survived or not, the innocence of that first hug was gone forever, replaced by the hard knowledge that love, when neglected, seeks connection wherever it can. And as Emily closed her door and leaned against it, breathing deeply, she understood that the hardest part was still ahead, because now that the truth was out, she would have to choose what mattered more, holding on to what had been broken, or letting go of what no longer felt whole, knowing that either choice would change her life in ways she could not yet see. Time moved forward whether anyone was ready or not, and in the weeks that followed, life became quieter, heavier, and more honest for Emily, because the truth, once spoken, changed the shape of every day. And she and Mark began counseling not as a dramatic rescue but as a slow effort to understand what had been lost and what could still be saved, sitting in small rooms with neutral walls, learning how distance had grown without either of them noticing, learning how comfort had slowly replaced curiosity, and some days felt hopeful, filled with clear conversations and shared memories that reminded Emily why she chose Mark in the first place, while other days felt unbearable, marked by silence, doubt, and the sharp awareness that trust does not heal quickly, because once cracked, it must be rebuilt piece by piece. Meanwhile, Daniel and Lisa pulled away completely, choosing space over closeness, focusing on their own marriage, and Emily did not hear from Daniel for a long time, which was both a relief and a quiet loss, because absence has its own weight. And when his message finally arrived weeks later, short and thoughtful, telling her he was choosing his marriage and wishing her peace, Emily felt a mix of sadness and gratitude, knowing that choosing the right path does not erase feelings, it simply honors responsibility. And she did not reply right away, letting the words settle, understanding that closure does not always come with a conversation. As winter approached, Emily spent more time walking alone, thinking about who she had been before comfort turned into distance, thinking about how easily people forget to tend to what matters most. And one evening she and Mark walked along the waterfront, city lights reflecting on the dark water, the air cold but clear. And for the first time in a long while, they spoke without defensiveness, without fear, acknowledging that their marriage might never return to what it was, but that it did not have to end to be meaningful, because growth often demands change. And as Mark admitted his mistakes without excuses and Emily admitted her own silence over the years, something softened between them, not forgiveness yet, but understanding, and when he reached for her hand, she let him. Feeling the familiar warmth mixed with uncertainty, realizing that love after hurt is not loud or dramatic, but careful and intentional. In the days that followed, Emily stopped searching for clear answers and started accepting honest ones, understanding that some stories do not end with perfect clarity, only with choice, and she chose to stay, not because it was easy, not because everything was healed, but because she believed in the possibility of becoming something new together. And as spring arrived, bringing light back into the city, Emily felt stronger, wiser, aware that one moment, a hug meant to be harmless, had changed everything, not by destroying her life, but by forcing her to see it clearly. And as she looked ahead, she understood that the future was no longer about avoiding mistakes, but about choosing presence, honesty, and care every single day, knowing that the rest of her story was still unwritten, shaped not by fear of loss, but by the courage to love with awareness and intention.